The velvet cushion beneath me felt like a throne I had no right to occupy. I hadn't meant to sit here. God, I hadn't meant to sit anywhere near the front of the hall. My plan had been simple: slip into the back row of the annual summit gathering, keep my head down, and leave the moment protocol allowed. But the crowd had been massive tonight. Alphas and their entourages from every pack in the Northern Territories, all crammed into the Moonstone Hall for the ceremony that would introduce the new ruling council. And I, in my typical graceless fashion, had gotten swept up in the current of bodies, pushed forward by the tide until I stumbled into an empty seat, just to avoid being trampled. It was only when I sat down, when my spine met the unexpectedly plush backing, and I caught the scent of aged leather, and something darker, pine and smoke and winter rain, that I realized my mistake. This wasn't just any seat. The chairs in this row were different from the others. Wider, more ornate, separated by small tables bearing crystal glasses of amber liquid I couldn't name. I looked to my left and saw a woman draped in furs, her neck heavy with silver that caught the candlelight. To my right, an empty chair that seemed to wait for someone, and beyond it, more empty seats, each one practically vibrating with importance. My stomach dropped. I'd sat in the section reserved for alphas, for pack leaders, for people who mattered. I tried to rise, my legs already tensing beneath my simple gray dress, the only formal thing I owned, bought secondhand 3 years ago and still too nice for someone like me. But the opening ceremonies had begun. The hall's massive doors groaned shut with a finality that made my chest tighten. A hush fell over the crowd, thick and absolute, and I knew that standing now would draw every eye in the room, so I froze, half standing, half sitting, caught between humiliation and protocol. That's when I felt it. A presence. Not beside me yet, but approaching. A shift in the air pressure. A change in the very temperature of the room. The crowd seemed to part without anyone actually moving, and I heard the whisper before I saw him. He's here. The Alpha King. Finally. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd never seen him in person. Most wolves of my rank hadn't. He was a story we told in hushed voices. A legend who'd unified the packs after decades of territorial wars. A leader whose strength was matched only by his ruthlessness. They said he'd killed his own father to stop a genocide. They said he could shift faster than thought itself. They said he never smiled, never showed mercy, never took a mate because no one could match him. I should have run, should have broken protocol and fled before he reached this row, but my body betrayed me, locked in place by some instinct I didn't understand. The same instinct that made rabbits freeze before wolves. And then he was there. I didn't see his face at first. I saw his hand. Scarred knuckles, long fingers, a silver ring carved with runes I couldn't read. That hand reached past me, past the empty chair to my right, and pulled it out slightly. He was taking his seat, right next to me, right next to the nobody who'd accidentally planted herself in the section reserved for royalty. Panic clawed up my throat. I managed to shift my weight, preparing to bolt, preparing to mouth an apology and disappear into the crowd before he noticed me. But I'd underestimated how close he was. My movement brought me nearly into his space, and for the first time, I looked up. He was already looking at me, eyes like winter storms, gray and silver and merciless. A face carved from stone and shadow, beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. Dark hair that brushed his collar, a mouth that had forgotten how to soften, and an expression I couldn't read, something between curiosity and recognition, as if he knew me from somewhere I'd never been. I opened my mouth to apologize, to explain, to beg his pardon for my stupidity. His hand moved faster than I could track. Not threatening, just deliberate. Those scarred fingers wrapped around my wrist, gentle but absolute, and he guided me back down into my seat, with a pressure that felt more like gravity than force. "Don't get up," he said. His voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of avalanches. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a command. It was simply a statement of fact, as inevitable as sunrise. "Stay here." The world narrowed to the points where his skin met mine. His thumb rested against my pulse point, and I knew he could feel the frantic rhythm there. Knew he could sense my fear and confusion, and the strange electric current that ran beneath both. I should have been terrified. I should have jerked away, stammered an apology, found some way to escape this nightmare. But something in his eyes held me more securely than his hand ever could. There was no anger there, no irritation at my intrusion. Instead, I saw something that made my breath catch. A loneliness so vast and so carefully hidden that I might have imagined it. The look of someone who'd been searching for something without knowing what it was, and had just found it in the last place he expected. My voice came out broken. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You're exactly where you're meant to be. His thumb moved, just slightly, a gesture so small it might have been unconscious. But it sent heat spiraling up my arm, into my chest, settling somewhere behind my sternum. What's your name? The question stunned me more than anything else. Alpha King Kalen Greystone. I'd heard his name spoken with reverence and fear for years, was asking me for my name. Me, the orphaned Omega from the borderlands. Me, the girl who'd spent the last 5 years working in the pack kitchens, invisible to everyone who mattered. Elena, I whispered. Elena Frost. Something flickered across his features. Not quite a smile. I sensed he didn't waste those on anyone, but a softening around his eyes, a subtle shift that made him look almost human. Elena Frost, he repeated, as if tasting each syllable. Are you here with a pack? The question carved open old wounds. I'd been without a pack since I was 16, since the night my parents' small territory was absorbed by a larger one, and I was deemed too weak, too ordinary, too Omega to be worth keeping. I'd drifted for a year before the Moonstone Pack offered me kitchen work in exchange for a roof and minimal protection. They tolerated me. They fed me. But I belonged to them the way a stray dog belongs to whoever throws its scraps. I work for the Moonstone Pack, I said carefully, in the kitchens. His eyes narrowed. You're not with them. I asked if you belong to a pack. The distinction shattered something inside me. He understood. Somehow this king who ruled over thousands, who commanded loyalty from the strongest wolves in the territories, understood the difference between being useful and being wanted. No, I admitted. I don't belong to anyone. The ceremony began in earnest before he could respond. The council members were announced one by one, each rising to applause that shook the rafters. I should have been paying attention. This was why I'd come, after all, to understand the new political landscape that would govern our lives. But I couldn't focus on anything except the man beside me. He hadn't let go of my wrist. His hand had shifted, loosening from a hold into something gentler. His fingers now resting against mine where they gripped the armrest. It should have felt possessive. It should have felt like a claim. But instead, it felt like an anchor. Like the only thing keeping me from floating away into the sea of strangers surrounding us. I became hyper-aware of every detail. The heat of his body, close enough that I could feel it despite the space between us. The scent of him, stronger now. That pine and smoke combination laced with something metallic and wild. The way his jaw tightened whenever another alpha was announced, as if he was constantly calculating, assessing, measuring threats. But his attention never fully left me. I felt it like sunlight on skin. The weight of his awareness, the way his focus would drift back to me between announcements, checking to make sure I was still there. As if I might vanish if he looked away too long. The woman in furs to my left kept shooting me venomous glances. I recognized her now, Lady Moira of the Silverwood Pack, known for her beauty and her vicious political maneuvering. She'd been positioning herself as a potential mate for the Alpha King for years, hosting elaborate hunts and balls designed to catch his attention. And here I was, in my second-hand dress and kitchen-worn hands, with his fingers tangled in mine. You're making a scene, I whispered, low enough that only he could hear. People are staring. Let them. The casual dismissal in those 2 words spoke of a lifetime of not caring what others thought, but I cared. I'd spent years trying not to be seen, not to be noticed, because notice meant danger for someone like me. Wolves who stood out got challenged. Omegas who drew attention got used or discarded. Please, I said, and hated how my voice shook. I don't want trouble. He turned to face me fully then, and the ceremony faded into background noise. Those storm gray eyes searched mine, looking for something I didn't know how to name. When's the last time someone chose you? He asked quietly. Not because you were useful, not because you served a purpose. When did someone last look at you and decide you were worth keeping? The question gutted me. I couldn't answer because the truth was too pathetic. Never. No one had ever chosen me for me. My parents had loved me, but love and choice were different things. They'd been stuck with the daughter fate gave them. Everyone else had tolerated me at best. That's what I thought, he murmured, when my silence stretched too long. His hand tightened around mine, not painfully, but with intention. I'm choosing you now, Elena Frost. Right here, in front of every pack in the Northern Territories. So whatever trouble you think this brings, I'll handle it. Understood? I didn't understand. Couldn't understand why a king would choose a Kitchen Omega, why those words sent lightning through my veins, why his simple declaration felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet. But before I could respond, the final announcement rang out, and now, the Alpha King Kaelin Greystone will address the assembly. He rose, finally releasing my hand, and the loss of contact felt like cold water. The entire hall rose with him, hundreds of wolves standing in respect, in fear, in awe. I stood too, my legs shaking, trying to blend into the crowd. But as Kaelin moved toward the podium, he paused, turned back, and extended his hand toward me, not a command, an invitation. Every eye in the Moonstone Hall fixed on us. I heard gasps, whispers, the sharp intake of breath from Lady Moira. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't done. Alpha Kings didn't acknowledge kitchen workers. They didn't interrupt ceremonies for nameless Omegas who'd sat in the wrong seat. My heart screamed at me to refuse, to sit back down, to make myself small again. But something deeper, something I'd buried under years of rejection and survival, stirred to life. I took his hand, and as he led me toward the front of the hall, toward a future I couldn't begin to imagine, I felt the weight of every stare, every judgment, every question burning into my back. What I didn't feel was alone. For the first time in 5 years, walking beside the most dangerous man in the territories, I didn't feel alone. The podium loomed before us like a guillotine. Kaelin's hand remained steady around mine as we climbed the 3 steps to the raised platform. My second-hand dress suddenly felt like rags against my skin, too thin, too plain, utterly wrong for this moment. Behind us, the silence had weight. Hundreds of wolves holding their breath, waiting to see what their king would do with the strange Omega he'd pulled from obscurity. He positioned me slightly behind him, not hiding me but sheltering me, and I realized with a start that he understood my terror. His thumb brushed once across my knuckles, a brief, grounding touch, before he released me to grip the edges of the podium. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall without strain. "The wars are over," he began. 23 years of territorial bloodshed, of packs turning on packs, of fathers sending sons to die for borders that shifted with every moon. That era ends tonight. I watched him command the room with nothing but presence, no theatrics, no raised voice, just absolute certainty that every word he spoke was law. "The council you've witnessed tonight will govern disputes, will maintain order, will ensure that what we've built doesn't crumble the moment I turn my back." His eyes swept the crowd, and I saw Alphas flinch under that gaze. But understand this, unity isn't the absence of conflict. It's the choice to resolve it without destroying ourselves in the process. Lady Moira had moved closer to the front, her expression carefully neutral, but her posture screaming displeasure. Beside her stood a male I recognized from kitchen gossip, Alpha Dorian of the Shadowpine Pack. Ambitious and cunning, always testing boundaries, they exchanged a look that made my skin prickle. Kaelin continued, outlining new laws, new trade agreements, new protocols for interpack relations. I should have been listening. Instead, I became aware of how exposed I was, standing here, on display. While my brain cataloged every reason this was a catastrophic mistake, they would think I'd seduced him, manipulated him somehow. Kitchen Omegas didn't end up on platforms beside kings unless they'd done something shameful, something calculating. By tomorrow, rumors would spread that I was his whore, his plaything, a temporary amusement he'd discard as quickly as he'd claimed me. My breathing quickened. The hall felt too hot, too crowded, the air too thick. I took a small step back, planning to slip away while his attention was on the assembly, to disappear before this situation got worse. His hand shot out and caught my wrist again. He didn't look at me, didn't pause in his speech, but his fingers wrapped around my wrist with that same gentle inevitability, and he pulled me forward until I stood directly beside him, level with him. Visible to everyone. The message was unmistakable. She stays. My face burned. I wanted to sink through the floor, to wake up in my narrow cot in the servants' quarters and discover this had all been a fever dream. But Kaylin's grip kept me tethered to reality, to this impossible moment that was rewriting my entire existence. He concluded his address with a warning about external threats. Rogue wolves gathering in the Eastern Territories, rumors of hunters organizing. Then he stepped back from the podium, and the hall erupted in applause that felt more like thunder. "Come," he murmured, finally looking at me. "We're leaving." What? I can't just... "You can." He guided me down the steps with a hand on the small of my back, and the intimacy of the gesture sent whispers rippling through the crowd. "Unless you'd prefer to stay and face them alone?" I glanced back at the sea of faces. Some curious, some hostile, most simply shocked. Lady Moira's expression had gone from displeasure to pure venom, and Alpha Dorian watched me with an intensity that made my instincts scream danger. "No," I whispered. "I don't want to stay." He led me through a side door I'd never noticed before, into a corridor lined with portraits of previous Alpha Kings. The noise of the hall faded behind us, replaced by the sound of our footsteps on marble and my own ragged breathing. "Where are we going?" I finally managed. "Somewhere we can talk without an audience." He navigated the corridors with ease, taking turns that led us deeper into the private sections of Moonstone Hall. "You're about to have questions. Better to ask them now than to let fear fill in the gaps." He was right. Questions crashed through my mind like waves. Why me? What did he want? What happened tomorrow when he realized his mistake? But the one that emerged surprised even me. "How did you know?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Know what?" "That I didn't belong to a pack. That no one had..." I couldn't finish the sentence. "That no one had chosen me. That I'd been alone so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted." Kaylin stopped before a heavy wooden door, his hand on the iron handle. "Because I see that look in the mirror every morning." The confession stunned me into silence. He pushed open the door, revealing a study lined with books and maps, dominated by a fireplace already crackling with flames. The warmth hit me immediately, chasing away the chill I hadn't realized I was carrying. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair near the fire. When I hesitated, he added more softly, "Please, Elena, sit." I sank into the chair, and he moved to a sidebar where crystal decanters caught the firelight. He poured 2 glasses of something dark and amber, bringing one to me before settling into the chair across from mine. "Drink. It'll help with the shaking." I looked down at my hands and saw he was right. They trembled like leaves in wind. I took the glass, grateful for something to hold, and sipped. The liquid burned going down, but it steadied something inside me. "I don't understand any of this," I admitted. "Why would you... in front of everyone, why would you choose me?" Kaylin was quiet for a long moment, studying the contents of his glass. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of things long buried. "My father was a tyrant, cruel and paranoid, and convinced that mercy was weakness. He killed my mother when I was 8 because she dared to suggest peace with the neighboring packs, said she'd been corrupted by softness." He took a drink. "I grew up learning that to survive, you had to be harder than stone, colder than winter. You couldn't afford connections because connections were vulnerabilities someone would exploit." I watched him, this powerful man who ruled thousands, and saw the boy he'd been, orphaned by violence, forced to become a weapon to survive. "I killed him when I was 22, he continued, "not for revenge, not for power, but because he was planning to massacre the Riverwood pack for refusing a treaty. 300 wolves, most of them children. He called it making an example." His jaw tightened. "So I made an example of him instead." "The stories say you unified the packs," I whispered. "The stories don't say what it cost." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the loneliness I'd glimpsed earlier. "I've spent 10 years building something that won't collapse into chaos the moment I'm gone. 10 years being what they needed me to be. Ruthless, untouchable, alone. Because that's what keeps the peace, that's what prevents another war." "But," I prompted, sensing there was more. But tonight, when I walked into that hall, I was so tired of it, Elena. Tired of the politics and the posturing and the endless parade of wolves who want something from me. Power, alliance, a connection to the throne. He set his glass down with a soft click. I took my seat, and I was preparing for another night of pretending to care about council appointments and trade routes, and then I looked to my right. My breath caught, and there you were, terrified, beautiful, so clearly out of place that it was almost painful to watch. You sat in that chair like you were waiting for someone to drag you out of it, like you couldn't believe you were allowed to exist in that space. His voice dropped, and I knew exactly how that felt. "So you took pity on me," I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice, a charitable gesture. "No." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, intensity rolling off him in waves. "I recognized you, not your face, not your name, but the shape of what you're carrying. That specific kind of loneliness that comes from being useful but never wanted, never chosen." His eyes held mine. "When I touched your wrist, I felt your pulse, racing, terrified, but you didn't pull away. And I thought, here's someone who's brave enough to stay even when every instinct screams to run. That's not bravery," I whispered. "That's just..." I didn't know what else to do. Bravery rarely does. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "I need you to understand something, Elena. What I did tonight, claiming you in front of the assembly, that's not something I can undo. The pack saw. They'll interpret it how they will. Most will assume you're my mistress. Some will think you've manipulated me with Omega Wiles. Others will wait to see if I discard you by morning." Each word was a stone dropping into my stomach. "So I'm... what? A political problem you've created for yourself? You're a choice I made." He stood and moved to the fireplace. One hand braced against the mantel. The flames painted shadows across his profile, softening nothing. "And I don't make choices lightly. But I'm giving you one now, because unlike everyone else in my life, you haven't asked me for anything." "What choice?" He turned to face me fully. "You can leave. Right now. I'll have someone escort you back to the kitchens, provide you with enough gold to start over somewhere new if you prefer. Tomorrow I'll tell anyone who asks that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, and your name will fade from memory within a week." My heart hammered. Freedom. Escape. Everything I'd wanted just an hour ago, handed to me without conditions. "Or," I whispered, "or you stay. Here, with me, and we figure out what this is together." His voice roughened. "I can't promise it'll be easy. You'll have enemies. Wolves who will see you as an obstacle to their own ambitions. You'll be scrutinized and judged and whispered about. Your every move will be watched." "That sounds terrible," I said honestly. "It is terrible." He crossed back to me, kneeling so we were eye level, and the gesture struck me, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, on his knees before a kitchen Omega. "But you won't be alone in it. You won't wake up wondering if today's the day someone decides you're not useful anymore. You won't have to make yourself small to survive." His hand came up, hovering near my face, waiting for permission. I gave it with a small nod, and his palm cupped my jaw, warm and calloused and impossibly gentle. "I'm choosing you, Elena Frost," he said again. "Not for what you can do for me, not for political advantage, but because when I looked at you tonight, I saw someone worth choosing. The question is, will you choose me back?" The fire crackled. My heart raced. And I realized that for the first time in my life, someone was offering me not just shelter or work or tolerance, but actual choice, the freedom to decide my own path, even if both options terrified me. I thought about the kitchens, the narrow cot, the invisible existence I'd carved out. Safe, predictable, lonely. Then I looked into storm-gray eyes that promised danger and belonging in equal measure. "I'll stay," I whispered, and watched something fierce and tender bloom across his face. The morning came too quickly and brought chaos with it. I woke in a room I didn't recognize. Not the servants' quarters with their thin walls and thinner mattresses, but a chamber 3 times the size of the kitchen storage room, with windows that overlooked the forest, and a bed so soft I'd barely slept, convinced I'd somehow damage it. Kaelin had left me here last night with instructions to rest. promising someone would come at dawn to help me navigate what he'd called the aftermath. I hadn't understood what he meant until the knock came. The woman who entered wasn't a servant. Her bearing was too proud, her clothing too fine, deep burgundy velvet that spoke of wealth and position. She was perhaps 40, with silver threading through her dark hair and eyes that assessed me with the precision of a jeweler examining a questionable stone. "Elena Frost," she said. Not a question, a statement. "I'm Vera Ashton, head of the king's household. His Majesty has asked me to prepare you." "Prepare me for what?" Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "For the fact that you're currently the most talked about wolf in the Northern Territories. By now, every pack from here to the eastern borders has heard that the Alpha King pulled an unknown Omega onto the platform during last night's ceremony. The speculation is, shall we say, creative." Heat flooded my face. I didn't ask for any of this. Few of us ask for the positions we find ourselves in. Vera moved to the wardrobe, opening it to reveal a collection of dresses I definitely hadn't owned yesterday. "Nevertheless, here you are. And if you're going to stand beside him, even temporarily, you need to understand what that means." Temporarily? The word stung more than it should have. She pulled out a gown of deep forest green, holding it up to the light. "I've served 3 Alpha Kings, girl. I've seen dozens of women pass through these halls, each one convinced they'd be different, that they'd be the one to capture his heart, to secure the position of queen." Her eyes found mine. "Most lasted a month. The longest made it 6, not because he's cruel, but because the weight of standing beside power like his eventually crushes those who weren't built for it. Then why prepare me at all? Because he asked me to. And because—" She paused, something shifting in her expression. "Because when I went to his study this morning to receive my instructions, he was standing at the window watching the sunrise. And he was smiling, Elena. Actually smiling. In 10 years of service, I've never seen that man smile at anything that wasn't a strategic victory." The revelation sent something fluttering through my chest. I pushed it down, afraid to examine it too closely. The next hours were a blur of preparations that felt more like battle training. Vera taught me how to navigate the complex hierarchy of the court. Who to acknowledge, who to avoid, whose insults to ignore, and whose to report directly to Kaelin. She explained that I'd be expected at breakfast in the main hall, that every eye would be watching to see how I handled myself. "Keep your spine straight," she instructed as she fastened the green dress around me. The fabric hugged my curves in ways my kitchen clothes never had, made me look like someone who belonged in these halls. "Don't apologize for existing. Don't explain yourself unless directly questioned by the king. And for the love of the moon, don't let Lady Moira see you flinch. She hates me. She hates everyone who breathes the same air as the king. You're just the latest target." Vera's hands were efficient, braiding my pale hair into something elegant. "But you have one advantage she'll never possess." "What's that?" "He chose you in front of witnesses. That's not something he can easily undo, even if he wanted to. Which means you have time to prove you're worth keeping." The words should have been encouraging. Instead, they settled like lead in my stomach. Worth keeping. As if I was livestock being evaluated for breeding potential. Breakfast was exactly as terrible as I'd imagined. The dining hall was smaller than the Moonstone Hall, but no less intimidating, with long tables arranged in a U-shape and morning light streaming through stained glass windows. I entered with Vera, who deposited me at the head table, where Kaelin already sat, reviewing papers with a council member I didn't recognize. He looked up as I approached, and something in his expression softened. "Elena." "Good. Sit." The chair he indicated was directly beside his, not at the far end of the table, not tucked away where I could fade into obscurity. Right next to him, in the position traditionally reserved for— I couldn't finish the thought. Didn't dare. "Your Majesty." Lady Moira's voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade through silk. She'd positioned herself across the table, her smile poisonous and sweet. "How delightful to see you've brought your guest to breakfast." "Elena isn't a guest," Kaelin said without looking up from his papers. "She's under my direct protection." "I trust that's clear to everyone present?" Murmurs of assent rippled through the assembled wolves, but I caught the glances exchanged between some of them. Alpha Dorian whispering to a female I didn't recognize, both their eyes fixed on me with calculation that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to eat, though the food tasted like ash. Kaylin periodically asked me quiet questions. Had I slept well? Was the room comfortable? Did I need anything? Small considerations that might have seemed insignificant to anyone else, but felt like lifelines to me. Halfway through the meal, a messenger arrived with urgent news. Rogue attacks on the eastern borders, 3 separate incidents in 2 days, coordinated in a way that suggested organization, rather than random violence. We need to send scouts, Alpha Dorian argued, leaning forward with practiced concern. Determine their numbers, their capabilities. We need to fortify the border packs first, another Alpha interrupted. Pull back our outlying settlements until... Gentlemen. Kaylin's voice cut through the debate like winter wind. We're not making strategic decisions over breakfast. Council convenes in 2 hours. Bring your proposals then. The dismissal was absolute, but as the wolves returned to their meals, I noticed Lady Moira watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not just hatred. Something more complex. Almost... curious. After breakfast, Kaylin pulled me aside into a smaller chamber off the main hall. How are you holding up? He asked, and the genuine concern in his voice nearly undid me. Everyone thinks I've seduced you, I said bluntly. That I'm some conniving Omega who's manipulated the great Alpha King into what? Acknowledging your existence? His hand found my shoulder, steadying. Let them think what they want. You and I know the truth, do we? The question escaped before I could stop it. Because I don't understand this, Kaylin. I don't understand what you want from me, what this is. What happens when what? When you realize I'm not worth the trouble I'm causing. His expression went very still. Then he moved, closing the distance between us, until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. His hands came up to frame my face, gentle but inescapable. Listen to me very carefully, he said softly. I've led armies into battle. I've negotiated treaties with wolves who wanted me dead. I've made decisions that cost lives and saved thousands more. I don't make mistakes about what's worth my time and what isn't. But you think you're not worth it because you've spent years being told you're disposable, replaceable, just another Omega without a pack, without power, without value beyond what services you can provide. His thumbs brushed across my cheekbones. But I see what they missed. The strength it takes to survive alone. The courage to sit in that chair when everything in you screamed to run. The honesty to admit your fear instead of hiding behind false confidence. Those aren't special qualities, I whispered. They're rare as diamonds in this world. Trust me. I've been looking. The intensity in his eyes stole my breath. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let myself fall into the safety he offered. But years of rejection had built walls around my heart, and they didn't crumble just because someone said pretty words. I have to go to council, he said, though he didn't move away. It'll take most of the day. Vera will stay with you, help you settle in. But Elena? Yes? Don't run. Please, I know it's frightening. I know this is happening too fast, but give it time. Give us time. Before I could respond, he leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead. Not a kiss exactly, more like a promise, a claiming, a benediction. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in the chamber with my heart racing and my thoughts in chaos. Vera found me moments later. Well, she said, eyeing me with new interest. That's unexpected. What is? He doesn't touch anyone, doesn't show affection in public or private. Too afraid of appearing weak, I think, or maybe just out of practice. She tilted her head. But he touched you, in front of me. In front of anyone who might have been watching. It was a declaration, Vera interrupted. Whether you realize it or not. Now come. We have work to do. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Vera introduced me to the complex web of servants, advisors, and minor nobility that made up the king's household. Some were welcoming, if cautious. Others barely concealed their disdain. A few, like the head cook, a warm woman named Iris who'd apparently heard of my kitchen work, seemed genuinely pleased to meet me. About time someone shook things up around here, Iris said, pressing a warm pastry into my hands. This place has been too stuffy for too long. You need anything, girl? You come find me. The kindness nearly broke me. I'd been braced for hostility, for jealousy, for the cutting remarks I'd overheard all day. But Iris's acceptance felt like cool water on burned skin. By evening, exhaustion had settled into my bones. Vera showed me back to my chambers, where I discovered the dresses in the wardrobe had multiplied. Dozens of gowns in every color, all perfectly sized to fit me. His Majesty's orders, Vera explained at my shocked expression, said you should have choices, said choosing what to wear should be the easiest decision you make all day. I ran my fingers over the fabrics, silk and velvet and materials I couldn't name, each one more beautiful than anything I'd ever owned. Vera, I said quietly, why is he doing this? Really? She was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its sharp edge. 10 years ago, when he killed his father and took the throne, he made a vow. He said he'd build something worth protecting. Something that wouldn't collapse into violence the moment he wasn't there to hold it together. She moved to the window, looking out over the darkening forest. But I think he forgot to build anything for himself. Forgot that kings are still wolves, and wolves need packs, need connection. And you think I'm that connection? I think you're the first person in a decade who didn't want something from him, who sat beside him not because of his power, but because... She trailed off, shrugging, because he asked you to stay. After she left, I stood at the window, watching night claim the sky. Somewhere in this massive complex, Calen was dealing with council politics and border threats, and the 1,000 responsibilities that came with his crown. And somehow, impossibly, he'd made space in all of that for me. I didn't know if I was brave enough for what that meant. Didn't know if I could survive in this world of politics and power plays and wolves who saw me as an obstacle to eliminate. But I knew I wasn't ready to run. Not yet. 3 weeks passed in a blur of lessons, challenges, and moments that felt stolen from someone else's life. Vera had been relentless in her training, drilling me on court etiquette until I could navigate a formal dinner without embarrassing myself. I learned which council members could be trusted, which ones were merely opportunistic, and which ones, like Alpha Dorian, were actively dangerous. I discovered that the court operated on layers of meaning, where a compliment could be an insult, and silence could be the deadliest response of all. But the evenings belonged to Calen. He'd return from council meetings or border inspections, tension carved into every line of his body, and find me wherever I was. The library, the gardens, once even back in the kitchens helping Iris prepare bread because my hands needed something familiar to hold on to. He never demanded my time, never ordered me to attend him. He simply appeared, settling into whatever space I occupied, and the tension would gradually bleed from his shoulders. We talked. About everything and nothing. He told me about the intricacies of pack politics, the delicate balance required to keep ambitious alphas from each other's throats. I told him about my childhood, the small territory my parents had managed before it was absorbed. The way my mother used to sing while she worked. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We'd sit in companionable silence, and I'd find myself studying him, the way firelight caught in his dark hair, the scars on his hands that told stories of violence survived, the rare moments when something I said would surprise a genuine smile from him. Those smiles became precious to me. Dangerous, because each one made it harder to remember that this was temporary, that I was still just an omega out of her depth, that eventually the novelty would wear off, and he'd realize his mistake. Lady Moira hadn't given up. She'd shifted tactics, becoming saccharine sweet in public, always positioning herself near Calen during formal events, laughing at his rare attempts at humor, touching his arm with practiced familiarity. Watching her work was like watching a master predator stalk prey, patient, strategic, utterly confident in her eventual success. She's going to make a move soon, Vera warned me one afternoon as we watched Lady Moira hold court among a cluster of visiting nobles. The spring equinox celebration is in 2 days. She'll use it to corner him, to create some situation where he has to acknowledge her publicly. Let her, I said, though the words tasted bitter. I'm not his mate. I'm not even... You're more to him than any wolf in this court, Vera interrupted sharply. But if you don't start acting like it, if you keep treating yourself as temporary, then that's exactly what you'll become. Her words haunted me through the following day, especially when Calen asked me to walk with him through the forest surrounding the compound. It had become our routine, stolen hours away from prying eyes, where he could drop the mantle of king and just be... himself. There's something I need to tell you, he said, as we followed a narrow trail through towering pines. About the equinox celebration. My stomach tightened. What about it? It's traditional for the Alpha King to open the festivities with a dance, usually with... He paused, choosing words carefully. With someone of significance. Last year, I didn't attend. The year before, I danced with Lady Moira because she'd negotiated a crucial trade agreement and it was politically expedient. And this year? I kept my voice neutral, though my heart hammered. He stopped walking, turning to face me. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, dappling his features with light and shadow. This year, I want to dance with you. The simple statement felt like standing on a cliff's edge. That'll cause talk. Everything about you causes talk. His hand came up, tucking a strand of pale hair behind my ear. But this talk will be deliberate, a message I'm choosing to send. What message? That you're not temporary. That you're not some passing fancy I'll discard when something shinier catches my attention. His voice dropped. That I'm courting you, Elena, properly. The way you deserve to be courted. The word courting sent electricity through my veins. It meant intention. Meant this was leading somewhere beyond stolen evenings and careful friendship. Meant he saw a future I was still too afraid to imagine. I don't know how to dance, I admitted. Not formal court dances, just kitchen celebrations. Simple steps. Something fierce and tender crossed his face. Then I'll teach you. We have 2 days. He did teach me, commandeering an empty ballroom and walking me through the intricate patterns of the equinox waltz. I stepped on his feet more times than I could count, apologizing each time until he finally caught my face in his hands and said, "Stop apologizing for learning. Stop apologizing for existing in this space." By the evening before the celebration, I could manage the basic steps without disaster. We were practicing one final time when the ballroom doors opened and Alpha Dorian entered, accompanied by 2 wolves I recognized from his pack. "Your Majesty," Dorian said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Forgive the interruption. I was hoping to discuss the border situation." Kaelin's hand tightened on my waist before releasing me. "Now? We have a council meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning." "This can't wait." Dorian's gaze flicked to me, dismissive and cold. "It's a matter of pack security." The implication was clear. I shouldn't be present for matters of importance. I started to excuse myself, but Kaelin's hand caught mine. "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Elena." Dorian's expression flickered. Surprise, calculation, then carefully masked displeasure. "Very well. We've captured one of the rogues from the eastern attacks. He claims they're not acting independently, says they're working for someone inside the court." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Working for whom?" Kaelin's voice went dangerously soft. "He won't say. Keeps insisting he'll only speak to you directly. But Your Majesty," Dorian leaned forward, earnest and concerned. "This could be a trap, a way to get you isolated, vulnerable. I'd recommend increased security, perhaps postponing tomorrow's celebration until we understand the threat." "Any postponing would show weakness," Kaelin said. "Signal that we're afraid. Or it would show wisdom, caution." Dorian's eyes found mine again. "Surely you want to protect those under your care. All those who depend on your strength." The subtle threat made my blood run cold. He wasn't just talking about the packs, he was talking about me, suggesting that my presence made Kaelin vulnerable, distracted, weak. "Thank you for the information, Dorian," Kaelin said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. "I'll interview the prisoner myself tomorrow morning. The celebration proceeds as planned." After Dorian left, tension radiated from Kaelin like heat from forge-struck metal. "He's right," I said quietly. "I am a distraction, a weakness someone could exploit." "No." Kaelin turned to me, eyes blazing. "You're the only thing keeping me from becoming what my father was. Don't you see that? Without you, without this." He gestured between us. "I'm just another tyrant with a crown. Someone who makes decisions based purely on strategy and power, who forgets that the wolves I'm protecting are people, not chess pieces. But if something happened to you because of me, Elena..." He crossed to me in 2 strides, hands framing my face. "Something is already happening to me because of you. I'm remembering what it feels like to want something beyond survival, to plan for a future that includes more than just preventing the next war. That's not weakness. That's what's kept me from losing myself completely. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the fear that whispered I was putting him in danger just by existing in his world. But Dorian's words had planted seeds of doubt, and they took root in soil already prepared by years of being told I wasn't worth the trouble. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, convinced assassins were creeping through the halls. When dawn finally came, I was exhausted and jittery, my nerves stretched to breaking. The spring equinox celebration began at sunset. Vera had outdone herself with my preparation, dressing me in a gown of midnight blue that seemed to capture starlight in its folds. My pale hair was swept up, secured with silver pins that caught the light. "You look like a queen," Vera said softly, studying me in the mirror. "I look like I'm playing dress-up," I countered, but even I could see the transformation. The girl from the kitchens was gone. In her place stood someone who might, just might, belong beside a king. The celebration took place in the grand courtyard, transformed with thousands of candles and spring flowers. Wolves from every major pack had gathered, dressed in their finest, ready to mark the changing of seasons and the continued peace Kaelin had built. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching them mingle and laugh, and felt the old familiar sensation of being outside looking in, until a hand appeared in my peripheral vision, extended in invitation. "Dance with me," Kaelin said. He was devastating in formal attire, black and silver that emphasized his strength, his power, the dangerous beauty that made strong wolves instinctively submit. But his eyes held only warmth as he looked at me, only patience as he waited for my answer. I placed my hand in his. The crowd parted as he led me to the center of the courtyard. Musicians began the opening strains of the Equinox Waltz, and I felt every eye fix on us. Lady Moira stood frozen near the refreshment tables, her expression a mask of shock and fury. Alpha Dorian watched with calculation. Others whispered behind hands, speculating, judging. "Just look at me," Kaelin murmured as he pulled me into the proper hold. "Forget them. Just us," and we danced. I stumbled once, early on, but his hand steadied me, found the rhythm. Let the music carry us through turns and steps that felt less like dancing and more like flying. His eyes never left mine, and in them I saw something that made my breath catch, not just desire, though that was there, but recognition, understanding. The look of someone who'd found what they'd been searching for without knowing they were searching at all. "You're beautiful," he said softly, "just for me. And brave, and worth every bit of trouble you think you're causing." Tears pricked my eyes. "Kaelin, I'm falling for you, Elena Frost. Have been since the moment you tried to apologize for existing in my presence. And I know you're scared. I know you think this can't last, that I'll wake up and realize my mistake." He spun me gently, bringing me back against him. "But I'm here to tell you, this isn't a mistake. You're not a mistake. And I'm not letting go." The music swelled toward its crescendo. Around us, other couples had joined the dance, but I barely noticed them. There was only Kaelin, only this moment, only the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of letting myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserved this. The final notes faded. Kaelin pulled me closer, his hand at the small of my back, and I felt it. The subtle shift in his breathing, the way his muscles tensed as if preparing for battle. "What's wrong?" I whispered. "Someone's watching us. Northwest corner. Don't look." But I did look, unable to help myself. And there, half hidden in shadow, I saw a figure in dark clothes slipping away from the celebration, moving with purpose toward the private wings of the compound, toward Kaelin's study, where he kept maps and strategic documents and information that could destroy everything he'd built. "Go," I said suddenly, pulling back. "Whatever that is, it's more important than—" "You're what's important," he said fiercely. "Then trust me to be safe while you protect what you've built." I pushed him gently. "Go. I'll stay here, surrounded by witnesses. Nothing can happen to me in front of the entire court." He hesitated, torn between duty and the instinct to keep me close. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Stay with Vera. Don't go anywhere alone." Then he was gone, moving through the crowd with lethal grace, following the shadow that had slipped into darkness. And I stood in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by celebrating wolves, with the terrible certainty that something was about to go very, very wrong. The celebration continued around me, oblivious to the danger threading through its edges. Vera materialized at my side within moments, her hand firm on my elbow. What happened? Where did he go? Someone was watching us, headed toward his study. I scanned the crowd, looking for allies, for anyone who might help if this went badly. We need to... A scream cut through the music. It came from inside the compound, high and sharp and full of terror. The courtyard fell silent, hundreds of wolves freezing mid-conversation, mid-dance, mid-laugh. Then chaos erupted as guards rushed toward the source, as alphas shouted for their pack members, as the celebration dissolved into panic. "Stay here," Vera commanded, but I was already moving. I couldn't explain the compulsion that drove me forward. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed to hide, to find a corner and wait for someone stronger to handle whatever crisis had emerged. But stronger than fear was the image of Kalen walking into danger alone, following a threat I'd spotted, potentially into a trap designed specifically for him. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring Vera's protests, following the flow of guards toward the eastern wing. The corridors were a maze, but I'd explored enough over the past weeks to navigate toward Kalen's study. My slippers made no sound on marble floors. The beautiful gown Vera had chosen suddenly felt like a costume, utterly wrong for whatever I was about to face. I rounded a corner and nearly collided with Iris, the head cook, her face pale with shock. "Elena, don't go that way. Someone's hurt." "Who?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "I don't know. Guards aren't letting anyone through," her hands twisted in her apron. "But I heard them say the king is in there and..." I didn't wait for her to finish. I ran. 2 guards stood outside the study, weapons drawn. They moved to block my path, but I ducked under their arms with a speed that surprised us all, and burst through the door before they could stop me. The scene inside froze me in place. Kalen stood in the center of the room, very still, his hands raised slightly in a gesture of non-aggression. Across from him, Alpha Dorian held a struggling figure, a young wolf I recognized from the Shadowpine pack, bleeding from a wound on his shoulder. And between them, scattered across Kalen's desk, were maps marked with strategic positions, troop movements, vulnerabilities in the border defenses. Information that, in the wrong hands, could unravel everything. "Elena," Kalen's voice was carefully controlled, but I heard the edge beneath it. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should he," I said, looking at Dorian. "What's happening?" "What's happening," Dorian said smoothly, "is that I've just prevented a disaster. This wolf, one of my own pack members, I'm ashamed to say, was attempting to steal classified information. I caught him in the act." The young wolf in his grip struggled harder. "That's not... He's lying." Dorian's hand tightened, and the wolf cried out in pain. "Careful with your accusations, boy. You're in enough trouble already." Something about the scene felt wrong. The timing too convenient. The way Dorian had positioned himself between Kalen and the door, blocking the easiest exit, the glint of satisfaction in his eyes that he couldn't quite hide. "Let him go," Kalen said quietly. "We'll sort this out properly with witnesses and..." "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Your Majesty." Dorian's free hand moved, and suddenly he held a blade, silver, etched with runes that made my skin crawl. "You see, this was never about stolen maps. It was about demonstrating a truth you've been too blind to see." "And what truth is that?" Kalen's body shifted subtly, preparing for violence. "That you've become weak, distracted." Dorian's eyes flicked to me, all because of a kitchen omega with pretty hair and sad eyes. "You've jeopardized everything. The stability we've built, the respect of the packs. For what? A pet? A plaything?" "Careful, Dorian." Kalen's voice dropped to a growl that raised every hair on my body. "You're about to cross a line you can't uncross. I'm saving us from your mistakes." Dorian's composure cracked, showing the ambition and resentment beneath. "The council agrees with me. Half the alphas in this compound agree with me. You're compromised, Kalen, unfit to lead. And when word spreads that you've chosen an omega over the safety of your people..." "He hasn't chosen anything over safety," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "He's maintained every alliance, prevented every conflict, kept the peace despite wolves like you constantly testing him." Dorian laughed. "Listen to her, already speaking as if she has authority, as if she matters." He pressed the blade against the young wolf's throat. "This is what happens when kings forget their place, when they prioritize feelings over strategy. The young wolf's eyes were wide with terror. And suddenly I understood. He wasn't the threat. He was bait. Dorian had orchestrated this entire scene, the maps, the theft, the convenient discovery, to force a confrontation, to make Kaelin choose between mercy and strength, knowing either choice could be used against him. If Kaelin showed mercy, saved the wolf, Dorian would paint him as soft, weak, too compromised by emotion to make hard decisions. If Kaelin prioritized the information, let the wolf die to prevent its spread, Dorian would have proof that the king had become cruel, ruthless, exactly like his father. There's a third option, I said quietly. Both men looked at me. Kaelin's expression was carefully neutral, but I saw the question in his eyes. Dorian's was openly contemptuous. And what would that be, little Omega? I moved before I could second-guess myself, crossing to Kaelin's desk and gathering the scattered maps. My hands shook, but I kept them steady through sheer will. These maps are worthless, I said. Anyone with strategic training can see they're outdated. Border positions from 3 months ago, before the winter repositioning. Dorian's eyes narrowed. You're lying. She's lying, Your Majesty, trying to... She's not. Kaelin's voice held a note of something I couldn't identify. Pride, maybe. Or surprise. The current defensive positions are stored elsewhere. These are decoys, kept in my study specifically in case someone attempted exactly this kind of theft. I saw the moment Dorian realized his plan was crumbling. The maps he'd built his confrontation around were meaningless. The proof of Kaelin's supposed negligence didn't exist. His carefully constructed trap had become one he'd sprung on himself. You're still weak, Dorian spat, but the conviction had drained from his voice. Still compromised by what? By caring about more than just power? Kaelin took a step forward, and Dorian instinctively retreated, dragging the young wolf with him. You think compassion is weakness, Dorian. You think that because I choose not to rule through fear, I'm somehow less capable of violence. Would you like me to demonstrate exactly how wrong you are? The temperature in the room plummeted. This was the Alpha King who'd ended wars, who'd killed his own father to prevent a massacre. The full weight of his power pressed down on us all, and I watched Dorian's face go pale. Or, Kaelin continued, his voice deceptively soft, you could release that wolf, surrender your blade, and accept exile from the northern territories, permanently. Take your pack and leave by dawn. That's the mercy I'm offering, and if I refuse, then I stop offering mercy. For a long moment, everything hung in balance. Then Dorian shoved the young wolf forward and dropped the blade, his face twisted with hatred and defeat. This isn't over, he said, as guards finally flooded into the room surrounding him. You'll fall, Kaelin. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but you'll fall. And it'll be because of her, because you chose weakness over strength. No, I said, surprising myself. He chose humanity over cruelty. There's a difference. Dorian was led away, still shouting threats and accusations. The young wolf was taken for medical attention, thanking Kaelin in a voice thick with gratitude and shock. Gradually, the study emptied until only Kaelin and I remained, standing among the evidence of a conspiracy that had failed. You shouldn't have come, he said finally. I know. You could have been hurt, could have been used against me. I know that too. He crossed to me, his hands finding my shoulders. Then why? Because you walked into danger for me. Every day, just by choosing me, you walk into danger. The least I could do was... My voice cracked. I couldn't just stand there, couldn't leave you to face this alone. Something shifted in his expression, some final wall crumbling. You saw through it. The maps. I didn't even realize they were decoys until you said it. But you saw the dates, saw they couldn't be current. I pay attention, I said simply. You've been teaching me. Even when you didn't realize it. All those evenings talking about border strategies, defensive positions. I listened. You're remarkable. His hand slid from my shoulders to frame my face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. And I'm done pretending this is temporary. Done acting like you're just someone I'm protecting until I can find you a better situation. Do you understand what I'm saying? My heart hammered. Tell me anyway. So I'm sure. I want you beside me. Not as a guest, not as someone under my protection, but as my partner, my mate. His thumbs brushed across my cheekbones, catching tears I hadn't realized were falling. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're there. Want to face every crisis knowing we'll handle it together. Want to build a future where you're not just part of my life, but essential to it. I'm scared, I whispered. Scared I'll let you down. Scared I'm not strong enough for this. You just faced down an alpha twice your size who was holding a hostage and threatening your king. You saw through his trap faster than I did. You stood your ground when every instinct must have screamed to run. He leaned down, his forehead touching mine. You're stronger than you know, Elena Frost. And I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life proving that to you. The last of my resistance crumbled. I'd spent so long protecting myself, keeping everyone at arm's length, convinced that caring meant inevitable pain. But here was this impossible man offering me everything I'd been afraid to want. Yes, I breathed. Yes, I'll stand beside you. Yes, I'll be your mate. Yes to all of it. His kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, as if I was something precious that might break. But when I pressed closer, when my hands tangled in his hair and pulled him down to me, the gentleness gave way to something fiercer. A claiming and a promise and a beginning, all at once. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, I saw the future written in his eyes. Not an easy one. We'd still face challenges, still have wolves who question my place beside him, still navigate the complex politics of ruling combined territories. But we'd face it together. The celebration, I said suddenly. Everyone's probably panicking. Let them panic for a few more minutes. He pulled me closer, tucking me against his chest, where I could hear the steady thunder of his heartbeat. I've spent 10 years putting everyone else first. For once, I'm keeping what's mine. The official mating ceremony took place 3 weeks later, under a full moon that painted the forest silver. Wolves from every pack gathered to witness the impossible, their alpha king, who'd sworn he'd never take a mate, binding himself to an omega who'd started life in a kitchen. Vera had outdone herself with the preparations, transforming the ceremony grounds into something out of a dream, but the details blurred for me. What I remembered was Kalen's hand steady in mine as we spoke the ancient vows, the way his voice roughened when he promised to choose me, every day for the rest of our lives. The collective gasp from the crowd when he pulled me into a kiss that left no doubt about his intentions. Iris cried openly, not even trying to hide her tears. Vera watched with satisfaction, as if she'd orchestrated the whole thing from the beginning. Even some of the wolves who'd been skeptical seemed moved by the obvious connection between us. Lady Moira had left the territories shortly after Dorian's exile, taking her ambitions elsewhere. The young wolf Dorian had used as a pawn had recovered and pledged himself to Kalen's personal guard, determined to repay the mercy he'd been shown. And me? I stood beside the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, wearing a crown of spring flowers and a dress that cost more than I'd earned in years of kitchen work, and felt like I'd finally come home. "What are you thinking?" Kalen murmured during the reception, pulling me away from the crowd for a moment of privacy. That a month ago I was invisible. Nobody, just another Omega trying to survive. And now? Now I'm standing beside a king, about to become a queen. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I still can't quite believe it's real. He turned me to face him, his hands settling on my waist. It's real, Elena. This is real. You're real. We're real. And nothing, not conspiracies or politics or wolves who think they know better, nothing will change that. I reached up, tracing the strong line of his jaw, marveling that I was allowed to touch him like this, that this powerful, dangerous, beautiful man had chosen me out of everyone he could have had. "I love you," I said. The first time I'd spoken the words aloud, though I'd felt them for weeks. I love you for seeing me when I was invisible, for making space for me when I had nowhere to belong, for teaching me that I was worth choosing. His expression went soft in a way I'd learned was reserved only for me. And I love you for reminding me what it means to be human instead of just a king, for being brave enough to stay when fear said to run, for choosing me back. As the celebration continued around us, as our future spread out before us full of challenges and joy and the everyday magic of building a life together, I realized something profound. I'd walked into that summit meeting expecting nothing more than another evening of invisibility. Instead, I'd accidentally sat beside a king, and he'd taken my hand and changed everything. The girl who'd spent years believing she didn't matter had become a queen, not through manipulation or seduction or any of the things the gossips had whispered, but through the simple, revolutionary act of being seen, of being chosen, of choosing back. And as Kaylin pulled me into another kiss under the approving moon, surrounded by wolves who'd come to accept what we'd built together, I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. Our story, the king who'd forgotten how to hope, and the Omega who'd reminded him, was still being written, and I couldn't wait to see what came next.